This next video, hi by the way, this next video is about color. So the previous video that I just made, I looked at shapes, drawing shapes into a canvas using beginner steps with p5.js. And now, maybe you made something with just shapes. Of course, the natural next step is to make some stuff have some color. So maybe you had a canvas, you have a canvas, perhaps has a rectangle on it, maybe it has an ellipse on it, and maybe it has some lines on it. Perhaps you came up with a much more interesting design than this. And now we have to ask the question, everything you noticed was just black lines and white interiors. So how do I color these shapes? So to draw these shapes, we learned a bunch of commands, but really the word we should be using is functions. I showed you a bunch of functions. Rect, ellipse, line. These are three functions. Rect draws a rectangle, ellipse draws an ellipse, line draws a line. These are for drawing. Now for color, there are also functions, and I think there are three relevant ones that I want to look at in this video. Background, stroke, and fill. The background function will set a color for the background, the entire canvas. What is the color that's in the background of the canvas? Although, the word background is a little bit of a misnomer here, even though we use it. I'm going to use it to set the background. The order of when we call these functions is quite crucial, and I will show you that as well. Stroke. Stroke is the function that sets the color for the outline of a shape. So what is the color of the pixels of a line? What is the color of the outline of a rectangle? And fill sets the color of the interior of a shape. So let's say the code for this was rect something or other, ellipse something or other, line something or other. So now we need to figure out, if I want to set the stroke or the fill for this rectangle, where do I write these functions? Where do I execute these commands? If I want to set the fill or the stroke for the circle, the ellipse, where do I write these commands? And now, order of operations has always been important, but it's particularly important. When you call these functions, it's kind of like setting the color of a pen. So before I draw the rectangle, I need to set the color of my pen to red or blue, etc. So if I want to set the stroke or fill, I don't have a lot of room here, the stroke or fill of this rectangle, I need to write these function calls before I execute the function rectangle. And then if the next thing I do is ellipse, it will also use that same stroke and fill. And line will also use that same stroke, not the fill, because there's no fill for a line. So if I want to then change the color, have a different color for the ellipse, then I just need to have another call to stroke and fill. After I draw that rectangle, I need to set new pen colors for that ellipse. So this is part one. Part one is I got to put these things in some proper order. Part two is, what do I put inside here? What do I put inside these functions, stroke, fill, background, etc.? That's a very good question. I wish I had time to answer that question. I do. I have to answer it. Okay, so let's erase all of this for a moment. And let's think about color. Now, there's a lot of ways to describe color in the world. I could get some paint, and it would just say the words red on the can, and that would mean that there's red there. But we need a mechanism, we need a methodology, we need a system for defining color in p5.js. And I'm going to use the p5.js system, which is really just mostly how color is defined in most computer graphic systems. And the basic way that I'm going to look at it with you is RGB color, meaning a color is a combination of an amount of red, an amount of green, and an amount of blue. So, for example, if I say stroke 255, 0, 0, what does this mean? Well, stroke can accept three arguments. The first one being the amount of red, the second one being the amount of green, and the third one being the amount of blue. So you can now sort of guess. There's clearly no green and no blue because I've set the value to 0. However, there's some amount of red. 255, does that mean like a little bit of red, a lot of red? It turns out that means the maximum amount of red. So the range for these arguments is between 0 and 255, meaning there are 256 possibilities. You know, I'm spending a minute to mention, I can't spell possibilities, but I'm spending a minute to mention this because this way of counting is actually will come up again and again in programming, right? Let's say I said the range is between 0 and 9. How many possibilities are there? There's 10, right? I'm going to just take a moment to prove this to myself. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whoa. 10, right, I counted to 10. It's confusing because I got to, see, this is a very confusing world we live in. I got to 9, but there are 10. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boy, I've really turned into a crazy person, counting on my fingers in a room by myself with the cameras pointed at me. But, so this is the range. Now, why is it this range? It has to do with the way that information is stored in the computer's memory and bits and binary numbers and all that stuff. And I would love, I actually wouldn't love, but I could, or I might fail at it, but I could go talk about that more. But you could find another video, or maybe I'll make another video, or send me an email or something, and we'll find a way to talk about that more. Right now, I think it's easiest for us to just think of this is the range. And you can change that range too. There's a function in p5 that allows you to adjust that range. But for now, let's keep that range, 0 to 255. So by the way, Phil will also take an RGB with a range of 0 to 255. Background will also take the same range, RGB. So let's go look at that now. Okay, so I have preceded here a little program that's drawing this little alien creature. And what I would like to do is take a moment to add some color. So, and this is an excuse to look at a couple other things. Number one is you can add comments into your program. So the way that you add comments is with a //. If you add a // to a line of code, the computer will completely ignore that line of code, meaning it's not executed. So you can put, whatever you want. You could write like little notes to yourself or little secret notes to a friend who's going to look at your code later, whatever you like to do. But here you can see a kind of typical use. Well, this rectangle is the body of this. This ellipse is the head. These two ellipses, ellipsawakadoodle, those are the eyes. And these two lines are the legs. So this is a useful thing. I would get in the habit of this now. If you can get yourself to do it, it makes things easier later. So for example, if I just add right now Phil 25500 and I hit play, we can see, look, everything is all red. All the shapes now have a fill of red. But if I were to come down here and say fill 0, 255, 0, and look what I've done. No red, all green, no blue. And now you can see the eyes have a fill of green. Now, did anything come after the eyes? Just the legs. And the legs don't have a fill, so green only affected the eyes. And I could say here, fill 0, 0, 255. And I could hit run again. We can see now the body is red, the eyes are green, and the head is blue. Now, interestingly, this order of operations is really important. Notice how the head is drawn after the body. Let's just very briefly move the head above the body. And you can see what's going on here. That rectangle is covering that ellipse. So P5 is going to draw the shapes, layer them in the order of the sequence of the code in draw. So that's a kind of key piece. So the way this design works is the head has got to come after the body so that it covers up that top portion of the rectangle. And the same is true in terms of fill and stroke. If I take this red fill and put it after body, the body no longer is red because I called fill after rectangle. So that red fill has to go before rectangle. That's kind of a crucial piece of information as well. The other thing we should notice here is that I have background here. Now background, let's make the background so first of all, you can combine, you don't have to just do all red and no green and blue. I'm not very good at this color thing. I hope that you are. But you can obviously combine colors. You put red and green together and you get something like, put a little red, a little green, and no blue. You can see you get like a kind of a different green. Let's put a lot more red. You get kind of like a yellowish, greenish thing. That's kind of yellow. So you can see that you can start to play around with different amounts of red and green. But notice how this background there, background, you think like, okay, background, it's drawing the background. So whatever I call background with a color, it should put everything behind. But you have to remember, background, all it's doing is actually filling the entire canvas with a color. So if I were to take background and put it at the very end of draw, you can see now background is being called after all the code. I won't see anything at all. All those things were drawn, but when we get to the end of draw to see the results, background has covered anything. So this is another reason why the order of operations is important. And I'm mostly finished now, but I want to mention two other things about color. Okay, so let's look at something. In background, let's say I put 50, 50, 50. What did I get? I got kind of this dark gray. Let's make it 150, 150, 150. I got this light gray. So one thing you'll notice, if the red value equals the green value equals the blue value, you get a gray, you get a color, grayscale color. All 0 being all black, all 255 being all white. Why is this? So the reason why this is the way the color works here is the same as the way color works with light. So if you take a bright red flashlight and a bright green flashlight and a bright blue flashlight, you shine them all together, you add all the colors together, it's adding up colors, you get things that are brighter and brighter and brighter, you'll get white. No color, the absence of color is black. So grayscale color is something you might want to use kind of often, and it's inconvenient to write 150, 150, 150. So one of the things that you can do is you can also call all these functions background, stroke, and fill with only a single argument. And if you use a single argument, you get the grayscale color. So that's an important thing. The other thing I should mention, kind of briefly, but you have to dive into this a little more, is these functions. We looked at how these functions always take 3 arguments. Now we saw how they could take 1 argument. There's another possibility. They can also take 4 arguments, and that last argument, you can't see what I'm writing here, is transparency, sometimes referred to as alpha, transparency. So is that color, all of our colors have been fully opaque. So when you put a shape on top of another shape, it completely blocks out the other shape. But if you want to create the illusion of it being see-through, you can add a 4th argument. 0 being completely see-through, you can't even see the color at all. 255 being 100% opaque, that's what we've been doing already. So let's look at that very briefly. I think a nice place to see that would be with the head. Let's see what we got here. So remember how that head was covering up this rectangle? What if I add a 4th argument to the fill, and I say like 100? You can see now that that head is transparent, so it has its own fill, but you can kind of see what's behind it. There's obviously a ton of stuff you can do with like color and combining it and shapes in a million different ways. Hopefully this gives you a basic start. And what I would say is, if you were working on a design from your previous, that you worked on after watching the previous video, now try to add some color with it. And again, just to mention, what I would recommend you do, and I seem to have lost that page, is go to p5.js, go to reference, go to color, and whoops, I clicked something wrong. Go to color, and you can see here are the functions that you might take a look at. Fill, stroke, background. By the way, no fill if you want to not have an interior shape, an interior color for a shape. No stroke if you want to not have an outline. Color mode, that's that function I was kind of mentioning. You could change the range. If you don't want to have your color between 0 and 255, you want to go between 0 and 100. There's also other ways of thinking about color. You can dive into that a bit yourself. But again, the nice thing about working with P5 is you can go here and you can just hit edit, and you could play around and say, okay, this is grayscale 51, and now I'm going to change it to RGB and run it and see what I get. But you can see there's lots of different there's so many different ways you can do color actually in P5, and I barely just scratched the surface of it. Okay, but this has got to be the end of this video. It's 15 minutes long, which is a very long time in the internet world, and I'm going to go eat some lunch now before I fall over. Okay, have a good rest of your day. I'll be back making more later. Oops, come on, mouse.